Hi, I'm doing another podcast today after seeing the Rupert Lowe inquiry launched and the speech of Sammy Woodhouse. This podcast is called When Institutions Fail, Grooming, Fear and the Cost of Secrecy. Disclaimer. Before I begin, I want to be clear about the purpose of this episode. This podcast is investigative and reflective. It does not make allegations against any individual or community, and it does not disclose private family court proceedings. Everything shared here is either personal lived experience, publicly documented inquiry findings, or reflection on patterns that have emerged over time. This episode is about institutional failure, not collective guilt. Why this episode exists? For years, the public has asked how organised child sexual exploitation was able to continue in plain sight across multiple towns in the UK. Survivors asked for help, parents raised alarms, professionals documented concerns, and yet, again and again, institutions failed to act. This episode is not about sensationalism. It is about understanding why those failures happened, how fear and politics played a role, and where the consequences went when criminal justice did not respond. Because when one system fails to act openly, the harm does not disappear, it moves. What public inquiries have already established. Independent inquiries into child sexual exploitation in towns such as Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Oxford and others established several consistent findings. Abuse was organised. Victims were targeted, groomed, controlled and exploited over time. Repeated warnings were ignored. Survivors were disbelieved, blamed or treated as troublesome rather than protected. One of the most disturbing findings was not just the abuse itself, but the institutional fear that surrounded it. Officials later admitted that concerns about reputational damage, community tensions, and accusations of racism contributed to inaction. This was not a failure of knowledge. It was a failure of courage. The political dimension, fear, not conspiracy. It is important to be precise here. There is no evidence that political parties traded votes or explicitly protected perpetrators. But inquiries did establish something else. Political and institutional leaders feared the consequences of acting. In areas where abuse involved organised local networks, confronting it openly was seen as politically risky. Fear of destabilising local power, fear of being accused of discrimination, and fear of reputational collapse all played a role. That fear produced paralysis, and paralysis allowed abuse to continue. When leaders choose self-preservation over child protection, the outcome is not neutrality, it is harm. What happens when criminal justice does not act? When criminal investigations stall or fail, cases simply do not vanish. They often reappear elsewhere, most commonly in family courts. Family courts do not operate like criminal courts. They are not truth-finding courts. They manage risk, not guilt. They operate largely in secrecy, with reporting restrictions and limited public oversight. This creates a space where unresolved abuse concerns can be reframed, not as crimes to be prosecuted, but as risk issues to be managed. And in that space, outcomes can shift dramatically. Parents as the problem. Across many cases, parents, most often mothers, who attempted to protect their children were reframed as the problem. Protective action became hostility. Refusal to cooperate became non-compliance. Attempts to remove children from danger became breaches of orders. There are documented cases where parents were arrested, prosecuted, or imprisoned for acting outside court orders, even when they believed they were safeguarding their children. Once criminalised, their credibility was destroyed. And once credibility was gone, so was their voice. The prison testimony, when victims are punished. I witnessed this pattern directly while I was in prison on a mother and baby unit, living there with my own child. That unit is a place where punishment and motherhood exist side by side. It is where you see clearly that imprisonment does not erase maternal bonds. While I was there, I met a young woman who was also caring for her baby on the unit. She told me she had been groomed and exploited as a teenager. She told me the abuse involved multiple men, that she had been controlled over a period of time, and that she had been forced to move drugs for them. She later gave birth to a child, and that baby was with her on the mother and baby unit, the same unit where I was housed with my own baby. Her child was visibly different in appearance. I want to be clear and responsible. I cannot verify every part of her account, and I do not present her story as evidence. What I am sharing is what I witnessed. A young mother nurturing her baby inside prison after a life shaped by exploitation rather than protection. She was treated as an offender first and a victim, if at all, second. That experience forced me to confront a hard truth. Systems often recognise victimhood only after punishment has already occurred. Why this mattered to me personally? I recognise this pattern because I lived a different version of it myself. I was criminalised for breaching an order while trying to protect my child. During a supervised visit contact, my daughter clung to me crying and begging me to take her home. I was instructed to end the contact and place her into a car. As I tried to comply, my body shut down. I couldn't breathe. I collapsed and was taken away by ambulance while my child watched. That was not defiance. That was not manipulation. That was the physical reality of maternal separation distress. Different circumstances, the same outcome. A system unable to recognise trauma, responding instead with punishment and control. The cost of secrecy. When abuse is hidden, fear replaces accountability. When fear governs institutions, victims are silenced. When secrecy becomes routine, harm becomes invisible. Family courts were never designed to resolve organised sexual exploitation. Yet, they increasingly became the place where unresolved abuse concerns were absorbed and neutralised, not because of conspiracy, but because of silence. What this episode asks: This episode is not about assigning collective guilt. It is about naming institutional harm, institutional failure. It is about recognising how fear, politics, secrecy, and risk management can combine to punish victims and protect systems. Until we are willing to examine how these dynamics interact, honestly and publicly, children will continue to be failed, and parents will continue to be criminalised for trying to protect them. This investigation exists to ensure those patterns are finally seen. Thank you for listening. Please like and share.